Imagine a home where the walls seem to whisper secrets, where the flicker of a kitchen light casts shadows that hide more than they reveal. It's a place where love wears a mask, pretty on the outside, rotten and unraveling within. On a deceptively ordinary evening in Bristol, England, March 25th, 2022, that mask finally slipped. The clock ticked past 8 p.m., and in the heart of a modest family house, the air thickened with unspoken dread. Shouts pierced the quiet like shards of glass, building to a crescendo that hung heavy, then shattered into a silence so profound it screamed. Upstairs, a 3-year-old boy stirred from his dreams, tiny feet padding to the stairwell's edge. He peered down into the abyss below, his innocent eyes widening at a sight that would scar his soul forever. His father, Bradley Lewis, crumpling to the kitchen floor in a crimson bloom, gasping for air that wouldn't come, and his mother, Abigail White, frozen in the dim glow, her hands trembling not with remorse, but with the frantic instinct to veil the truth. This wasn't mere anger's echo. It was the fatal tear in the fabric of a mind long cloaked in trauma's fog, a relationship poisoned by jealousy's venom where every "I love you" hid a dagger's edge. No one saw the end coming until the veil lifted, revealing a horror that would echo through Bristol's streets like a ghost's lament. Only one voice would remain to whisper the tale, but whose truth would it be? What invisible threads woven from years of unspoken pain pulled them to this precipice? And in the quiet aftermath, as the sirens faded, who would bear the weight of a child's shattered innocence? Welcome to Mind Veil, where we peel back the layers of the human psyche, exposing the hidden fractures that turn ordinary lives into nightmares. Tonight, we delve into the labyrinth of Abigail White's fractured mind, a woman whose early wounds wove a web of control and chaos, ensnaring the man she claimed to love in a deadly embrace. But beneath the rage, what veils did she hide? Was it survival's brutal armor forged in the fires of childhood betrayal, or a darkness that consumed all light, leaving only echoes of the girl she once might have been? We'll explore not just the act, but the quiet erosions, the subtle shifts in power, the unspoken fears that fester like mold in damp Bristol walls. Strap in, because this story doesn't just shock, it lingers like a shadow you can't outrun, forcing us to confront the veils we all wear in our closest bonds. How thin is the line between love and lethal possession? Let's lift it together. To understand the storm that was Abigail White, we must first lift the veil on her origins. A childhood not of fairy tales, but of fractured mirrors, reflecting endless pain. Born in 1998 in the gritty underbelly of Bristol, amid the hum of terraced houses and the distant rumble of the Avon, Abigail entered a world already cracked by violence. Her father loomed like a storm cloud over their cramped flat, his fists a currency of control, raining down on her mother in fits of alcoholic fury that shook the thin walls. Little Abigail, barely old enough to grasp the world beyond her toy-strewn corner, huddled under threadbare blankets, her wide eyes absorbing the symphony of screams and crashes like a sponge soaks blood. Each blow etched a lesson into her young psyche. Love was a battlefield, unpredictable and punishing, and vulnerability, a fatal weakness that invited the storm. The neighbors heard the rows, the thud of flesh on flesh, but in those pre-social media days, intervention was a whisper, not a shout. Abigail learned early to shrink, to veil her tears behind a defiant glare, her small hands clenched into fists that mirrored her father's. When her parents finally splintered apart in a messy divorce, court papers fluttering like fallen leaves, a fragile hope flickered. Perhaps peace could bloom in the ruins, a chance for her mother to rebuild without the shadow. But fate, that cruel architect with a blueprint for heartbreak, had other designs. Abigail's mother, battered but unbowed, sought solace in new arms, inviting a stepfather into their fragile nest on the outskirts of the city. What followed wasn't healing, but a darker echo of the past, amplified by familiarity's cruel twist. This man, with his promises of stability and his steady job at the docks, was meant to mend the fractures, to be the father figure Abigail craved. Instead, he amplified the torment, his temper a slow-burning fuse ignited by the stresses of blended life. As Abigail's mother swelled with a new sibling, a half-brother who arrived with coos and cuddles, his cruelty sharpened like a blade honed on resentment, targeting the stepdaughter who dared to exist in his shadow, a reminder of the life he'd inherited rather than chosen. Whispers of abuse slithered through the home like fog off the estuary, slaps that echoed like thunder in the narrow hallway, words that cut deeper than scars, leaving invisible welts on Abigail's spirit. Nights blurred into a carousel of fear, tiptoeing past creaking floorboards, feigning sleep as muffled cries seeped under doors. The cycle spun relentlessly, a merry-go-round of pain from which escape seemed impossible, each revolution grinding her trust a little finer. By her early teens, the truth clawed its way out in a raw, explosive confession during a school counseling session, a dam breaking after years of silent floods. Social services swooped in like reluctant guardians, ripping Abigail from the only world she knew, flawed as it was, and thrusting her into the uncertain arms of foster care, a system stretched thin by bureaucracy and budget cuts. Foster homes promised sanctuary, a soft landing for a bird with broken wings, a chance to rewrite the script in unfamiliar sitting rooms, scented with instant coffee and faded lavender. Yet for Abigail, they were just new cages, gilded with good intentions but barred by her unhealed wounds and the foster parents' weary eyes. The trauma festered like an untreated wound in the damp Bristol air, manifesting in explosive bursts that school counselors could only label as behavioral issues in terse reports. Classrooms became coliseums where the slightest slight, a stolen glance from a classmate, a whispered slight from a teacher, ignited her fury like dry tinder to flame. Desks overturned with a crash that silenced the room, voices raised in defiance that echoed down corridors. Her anger wasn't rebellion for rebellion's sake, but a desperate grasp for control in a life that had stripped her bare time and again. Teachers watched warily from behind clipboards as she lashed out, her eyes flashing with a fire born not of malice, but of deep-seated terror. The fear that if she didn't strike first, the world would crush her again as it had so many times before. Whispers in the staff room painted her as troubled, a label that stuck like glue, but few delved deeper into the why, the how a girl's heart, once tender, had hardened into armor. Expulsion followed like a shadow, inevitable and cold, shuttling her to a specialized school for troubled souls on the city's edge, a place where discipline meant survival amid graffiti-scarred walls, and therapist sessions peeled back layers only to reveal more voids, more echoes of screams from a past that refused to fade. A brief respite came in her grandmother's care, a silver-haired sentinel in a cozy, semi-detached with net curtains and the faint scent of baking biscuits, offering quiet evenings of telly and tentative hugs. For a moment, Abigail tasted something like roots, stories of family lore over cups of tea, a garden where she could weed out frustrations without consequence. But even there, her tempests raged unchecked, moods swinging like pendulums from bubbly affection to sudden apocalypse, a slammed door shattering the peace over a misplaced remote. The elderly woman, her own health fraying like old lace, was overwhelmed by the whirlwind of a granddaughter's unfiltered storm. Patience, stretched thin by arthritis and isolation, finally snapped. At 13, Abigail was returned to her biological father, a man whose own demons, bottles of cheap whiskey glugging late into the night, mirrored the chaos she'd fled, his flat a haze of fag smoke and regret. Therapy beckoned like a distant lighthouse through the fog, mandatory sessions in sterile NHS rooms where words tumbled out in halting confessions, therapists nodding with practiced empathy. But the darkness clung tighter, a barnacle on her soul, whispering escapes in the form of stolen sips from her father's stash. First, a burning gulp that numbed the edges, then cocaine sharpening them into crystalline highs, fleeting veils against the gnawing void within. By 15, the weight proved too much. Twice she teetered on oblivion's brink, suicide attempts in the dead of night. Pills scattered like confetti, wrists marked with desperate lines that screamed for someone, anyone, to see the girl behind the rage, to pull her from the undertow before it claimed her whole. Yet, in the haze of those turbulent teens, flickers of connection pierced the gloom like stubborn daffodils through cracked pavements. At 15, a boy entered her orbit during a rare school trip to the harbor side, a lanky lad with a cheeky grin and eyes that didn't flinch from her fire. He became her first boyfriend, a tentative bridge to what love might feel like untainted by fists or fear. For 7 months, it was a fragile bloom amid the thorns, shared secrets under flickering streetlights in Easton, laughter that chased shadows away during stolen chips from the chippy, hands brushing in the back row of the cinema. Abigail glimpsed a self beyond the scars, a girl who could be soft, who could dream of futures unmarred by midnight rose. She let her guard slip just a fraction, allowing vulnerability to peek through like sunlight on rain-slicked streets. But when it withered, as all fragile things do under the weight of her unaddressed storms, the spiral yanked her under once more, deeper this time, resentment blooming where tenderness had briefly rooted. Her next entanglement was a collision of desperation and danger. At 16, she fell into the arms of a 29-year-old man met through a dodgy online chat, a chasm of years that swallowed red flags whole like a black hole devours light. 2 years blurred by in a toxic tango, his so-called maturity a veneer over possession, her youth a canvas for his control, nights blending into a haze of mismatched expectations and whispered manipulations. It ended as she turned 18, aged out of foster care's grip with a curt letter and a council flat key, stepping into social housing that felt like freedom's first breath amid Bristol's sprawl. A modest 2-bed in Knoll West, walls she could paint her own defiant colors, but the echoes of past cages lingered in every creak of the floorboards, every slammed neighbor's door. That's when fate, ever the weaver of tangled threads with a penchant for irony, reintroduced Bradley Lewis. They'd crossed paths in school days, awkward glances amid adolescent chaos in the corridors of Brislington Comprehensive, Him, the quiet lad with a football under his arm, her, the whirlwind everyone gave wide berth. Now, at 19 to his 17, those old sparks reignited into flames during a chance reunion at a local fairground, the air thick with candy floss and possibility. Their bond accelerated like a runaway train on the old Great Western Line. Within months, their first child arrived, a tiny miracle amid the mess of prams and midnight feeds. Over 5 whirlwind years, 2 more followed, a trio of laughter and sticky fingers that painted their world in crayon chaos, transforming the flat into a riot of toys and half-eaten Weetabix. Bradley, ever the steady anchor in the tempest, toiled as a floor fitter for a local firm, his calloused hands laying laminate and lino foundations for a future he believed in with dogged optimism. Early mornings in high-vis, evenings collapsing on the settee with a tin of lager and match of the day. Abigail, the hearth-keeper in this fragile domesticity, poured her fractured heart into motherhood, chasing normalcy and bedtime stories read with theatrical voices, park swings under gray skies, and the simple joy of a nappy change without a row. But bills loomed like storm clouds over the Severn, one income a threadbare shield against poverty's bite, council tax notices piling up, the fridge echoing empty by week's end. Desperation birthed ingenuity, or so she told herself in the quiet hours scrolling her phone. Enter fake Barbie, Abigail's bold alter ego on OnlyFans, born from a late-night whim amid the glow of her smartphone screen. What began as a side hustle, provocative poses in the bathroom mirror, whispered confidences to faceless fans, exploded into a 50,000-pound windfall in her debut year, tips rolling in like manna from a digital heaven. For the first time, validation flooded in like sunlight, piercing Bristol's perennial drizzle, likes stacking like bricks, tips pinging notifications, messages that crowned her queen of her own digital realm, far from the judgments of social workers or sidelong glances at the school gates. It was power, intoxicating and illusory, a veil she draped over the insecurities gnawing at her core. Proof, perhaps, that she could command desire without the fear of abandonment. But money mends roofs, not hearts. It papers over cracks, but doesn't seal them. Beneath the glow of screen likes and the hum of a fuller bank account, their paradise curdled into poison, slow and insidious as milk left out in the summer heat. Bradley's long hours, dawn starts laying floors in sweltering lofts or chilly basements, fueled Abigail's suspicions, every delayed text a siren song of betrayal echoing her father's ghost. Fights ignited over trifles, a forgotten chore like unwashed pots stacking in the sink, a lingering glance at a barmaid during a rare pub pint. Abigail's demands were ironclad, constant affirmations texted like prayers, gifts as tribute from his meager wage packet, replies like lifelines tossed into her sea of doubt. Defiance met with tempests, shattered plates crunching underfoot like brittle bones, slammed doors rattling the neighbors, her voice a whip cracking through the night, leaving welts on Bradley's spirit as surely as on his skin. This wasn't passion's spark, the fiery rouse of young love. It was control's iron grip, forged in her childhood forge of fear, where letting go meant falling into the void. Bradley, patient to a fault with his easy West Country drawl and unflinching loyalty, absorbed the blows like a sponge soaks rain, his quiet strength a balm she both craved in vulnerable moments and resented when it highlighted her own fragility. Infidelity slithered in like smoke under the door, hers with fleeting lovers met on nights out, feeding her ego with hollow compliments. His with a woman from work who conceived his fourth child, a secret detonated like a grenade in a hushed clinic waiting room. Jealousy metastasized, roots twisting deeper, boundaries dissolved in a haze of group encounters arranged in dimly lit hotel rooms, intimate acts that masked the emotional voids, but amplified the shame, leaving them both hollowed out, clinging to wreckage. Abigail's rage spilled beyond their walls, a wildfire seeking oxygen in the night air of Bristol's pubs and clubs. One sticky Friday, in a throbbing nightclub off the center, a perceived slight, a sideways glance from a stranger amid the bass-thumping crowd, unleashed hell in the lady's fluorescent glare. Fists flew like confetti in a gale. The victim crumpled under a barrage of blows, her face a canvas of Abigail's unbridled fury, cheekbone blooming purple like a bruised plum. 12 months of community service followed, a judicial slap on the wrist, litter picking along the A4 or mandatory anger management in a drafty community hall that barely dented her armor, more annoyance than awakening. Social services circled like vultures after the assault made local headlines, welfare checks piercing their fragile facade with unannounced knocks and probing questions. Their home, once a haven of baby monitors and scattered Duplo, was deemed a tinderbox, toxic air choking the children's dreams, turning lullabies into tense silences. To claw back custody, teetering on the edge of removal, separation was enforced by stern-faced caseworkers. Bradley sought refuge at his mom's terraced house in Filton, tasting solitude's sweet clarity for the first time in years amid the familiar scent of her shepherd's pie. He pondered escape in those quiet evenings, sketching a life unyoked from the storm, more time with the kids, perhaps a fresh start in a quieter corner of Gloucestershire. But when he voiced it over a cautious phone call, Abigail's response was a siren's wail piercing the line, threats of self-harm slicing through like broken glass, vows to hunt his paramours down in the dead of night, to end his mother with poison in her tea, to drag him into the grave with her in a blaze of mutual destruction. TikTok became her megaphone, a digital dagger airing their viscera to thousands, mocking videos with filters turning her tears to smirks, leaked intimacies that blurred lines between victim and villain, confessions of violence that painted her as avenger, not abuser. "He deserves it, the cheat," she'd caption, thumbs up emojis raining from faceless followers. Bradley confided in shadows, mates at the pub nursing pints as he unburdened, his fear a noose tightening with every missed call, trapped not by love's golden chains, but by the terror of what her unraveling might unleash on the innocent lives tangled in their web. Early 2022 marked the precipice, the air thick with the scent of impending rain. Abigail's pregnancy announcement hung like a guillotine blade. Bradley the father, or so she swore with fierce certainty, though doubt shadowed his eyes like clouds over the Clifton Suspension Bridge. Her searches veered into the macabre on her battered laptop. Miscarriages one tab over from innocuous baby names, stabbings and nooses the next in a frenzy of midnight clicks, digital breadcrumbs of a mind teetering on the brink, algorithms feeding her darker curiosities. The decision to terminate came in solitude during a gray afternoon clinic visit, a unilateral severing that left Bradley adrift in guilt's wake. His texts of support met with silence. 6 days later, accusations blade found his arm in a row over a misplaced phone. Not an accident, but a punctuation in their bloody lexicon, the cut shallow but symbolic. He stitched the lie at A&E, self-inflicted slip with a craft knife, white-faced under the harsh lights, while Abigail texted a confidant in the waiting room. This ends in death or bars. And I could be the one to pull the trigger. The words hung, a prophecy, unspoken. March 25th dawned with deceptive serenity, daffodils nodding in the parks like oblivious sentinels. A park rendezvous in Brislington, Abigail flanked by a friend like a bodyguard in her own self-scripted drama, hands twisting a tissue as birdsong mocked the tension. Bradley's words fell like finality, steady despite the knot in his throat. It's over? For good? I can't keep doing this to us, to the kids. Her response? An unnatural hush, eyes veiled in calculation behind a forced smile, the calm of a sea hiding riptides below. Pub plans followed that afternoon, a forced civility with a handful of mates and the kids in tow. Normalcy's thin disguise over the festering wound, crisps and juice for the little ones amid adult unease. But alcohol flowed like venom from the taps, drugs sharpening her edges to razor keen in the dim booth. Bradley's half-hour delay, stuck in traffic on the ring road, cataclysm. Accusations erupted like fireworks on bonfire night. With her again, aren't you? That slag from work? He fled to the loo with a mate, door locked against the storm, spilling his soul in hoarse whispers over the sink. I'm drowning, mate. No way out. She's got me in a vice, and the kids, God, the kids. Emerging, pale and resolute, they faced the tempest head on. Abigail's lunge across the sticky floor, fists and spittle flying like shrapnel, friends peeling her off like burrs from wool. Beers ordered in a desperate truce shattered on the floorboards, foam mingling with fury in a frothy mess. Strangers intervened from nearby tables, one burly bloke shoved in reflex to create space. Abigail toppled with a theatrical yelp, dialing 999 on her mobile with a victim script. He let them attack me, omitting her provocations, the slaps and spits that lit the fuse. The children, wide-eyed satellites orbiting the chaos, absorbed the shrapnel from their corner booth, their world fracturing in real time, tiny hands clutching coloring books as if they could crayon away the cracks. A neighbor's lift home in his battered Ford was Bradley's requiem ride, the estate's sodium lamps flickering like dying stars. I'm already dead, he murmured to the dashboard, prophetic chill in the words that would haunt the driver for years. The doors click in their dimly lit hallway, reignited Armageddon, blame for the pub's melee hurled like accusations in a kangaroo court, her undefended honor a banner she waved in righteous fury. Abigail vanished into the kitchen amid the clatter of pots, emerging moments later with steel glinting in her fist under the harsh bulb, a bread knife, ordinary as toast, deadly as destiny. Bradley knew the dance all too well, the flinch-hardened steps from past close calls, but hesitation fled her this time like a shadow at dawn. One thrust, precise, primal, driven by a lifetime's pent-up storm, burrowed 17 centimeters into his chest, kissing his heart with finality, the blade twisting just enough to sever the vital. He staggered back against the fridge, a gurgle escaping as he slid down, collapsing amid pooling silence on the lino, life's tide ebbing in ragged breaths that fogged the air. Their son, ghosting down the stairs in his dinosaur pajamas, etched the scene eternal into his fragile memory. Mommy, stabbed, Daddy. The words, later coaxed from him by soft-voiced officers with teddies and crayons, would become the unyielding anchor of justice. Panic's veil descended on Abigail, not for aid, but erasure, a mother's instinct warped into a criminal's slight. Mop in hand from under the sink, she scoured the Crimson Testament with frantic strokes, shirt tumbling into the washer's maw with a mechanical whir that mocked the stillness. Denial's script formed in her racing mind, a call to a friend on speed dial, voice cracking over the line. He did it to himself. Tell me he'll pull through, please God. Neighbor Laura, drawn by the unnatural echoes seeping through party walls, burst in through the unlocked back door. Barefoot Abigail, in a rumpled pink dress, bruise blooming like a storm cloud on her arm from the pub scuffle, no blood to betray her hands that had just wielded death. Laura's hands, steady from years as a care assistant, pressed life into Bradley's still form on the cold floor, CPR, a desperate rhythm of compressions and breaths as dispatch barked orders through her mobile. Pressure the wound, love, hard as you can. But the flow was phantom, a sinister trickle, internal rivers carving canyons within, the blade's path a hidden saboteur. Laura's husband arrived home from his shift, face ashen at the doorway tableau, taking over compressions pounding like war drums on Bradley's unmoving chest. Sirens wailed at 8:48 through the spring dusk. Paramedics swarmed the narrow hall in blue uniforms, ferrying Bradley to the operating theater's cold altar at Southmead Hospital in a blur of needles and monitors. Hours blurred in futile battle under fluorescent glare, the surgeon's skilled hands battling the blade's unyielding kiss, stitching what could be mended, but finding the heart's chamber rent beyond repair. At 22, Bradley Lewis slipped beyond the veil, his final heartbeat a whisper lost in the beeps, orphaning 3 souls under 5 and etching eternal grief into the ledger of a family forever altered. Abigail's interrogation in the stark fluorescent hum of Bridewell Custody Suite was a hall of mirrors, reflections twisting blame like light through fractured glass. Suicide? He couldn't take it anymore. Then he wrested it from my hand in the row, finally his hand on mine, forcing fate, making me do it. But veils tear under scrutiny's unrelenting gaze. The toddler's testimony, Mommy stabbed Daddy, rang like judgment's bell in the interview room, corroborated by 200 souls from pub regulars to workmates, CCTV cams capturing the chaos in grainy monochrome. Her browser history, a digital autopsy of intent, laid bare in forensic reports. Borderline personality disorder, psychiatrists intoned in court with measured tones, sprouted from trauma's poisoned soil like weeds in cracked concrete, impulses unchecked as a dam in flood, emotions a tidal wave crashing without warning. Yet the jury, everyday folk from Bristol's diverse tapestry, saw choice amid the storm. No frantic 999 plea while he bled, staged scene over salvation, the mop and washer, a colder calculus than compassion. October 2022, in the oak-paneled solemnity of Bristol Crown Court, the gavel sealed it. Murder in the first degree, life imprisonment with a tariff of 18 years till parole's whisper might grace her file. Prison whispers now swirl through HMP Eastwood Park's corridors, a new romance blossoming in letters and visits, conjugal pleas that salt Bradley's family's wounds like vinegar on open sores, a life sentence mirroring their endless dawn without him, waking to empty chairs at the breakfast table, Christmases hollowed by absence. Memorials dot South Gloucestershire's green lanes, plaques on park benches where he once pushed swings, murals in community centers capturing his cheeky grin, a light unextinguished, his gentle laugh echoing in mates' pints, and the children's hesitant smiles as they navigate a world reshaped by loss. In Mind Veil, we don't just recount the act, we probe the psyche's shadows, tracing the fault lines where trauma meets choice. What veils did Abigail's pain erect, turning love's fragile thread to lethal illusion? And how might earlier hands, social workers overburdened, therapists underfunded, have mended the weave? Bradley's final words echo as caution across the ether. When toxicity veils as passion, the blade waits not just in the kitchen drawer, but in the heart's hidden chambers. This tale reminds us of the quiet epidemics in Britain's homes. Domestic abuse veiled as rows, children as silent sentinels to storms they can't name. If this unraveling gripped you, linger in the comments. What cracked her calm that fatal eve, or could Bradley's patience have been the spark that ignited it all? Share your thoughts. Let's peel back our own veils together. Thanks for unveiling the shadows with Mind Veil. Until next time, question the masks we all wear and the hands that hold the knife beneath them.